Hello and welcome to another episode of In Focus. Cannabis are going legal in Canada very soon. There are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. For all the answers to these questions, we are here in the office of Minister Bill Blair, Minister of Border Security and Organized Crime Reduction. Hello, Minister, and welcome to BC.
Hello, Rupinder. Very nice to see you.
Pleasure is ours. Minister, as the cannabis are going legal and the big day is approaching, but there are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns among Canadians. Is Canada ready for this legalization?
Well, Rupinder, let me assure you and all of your listeners that Canada has been doing a great deal of work over the past 2.5 years, and we are not merely legalizing cannabis. We are replacing the current system of cannabis control, which is done with a criminal prohibition, which has failed our kids, failed our communities, and has enriched criminals and led to a situation where we have the highest use of cannabis among our kids of any country in the world. And this is unacceptable to us. And so we are going to repeal that criminal prohibition and replace it with a comprehensive system of very effective regulation, strict regulation that will control every aspect of the production of cannabis, which is currently being grown illegally in houses that are being destroyed in neighborhoods. And we're going to take that business away from criminals and create a regulated industry so it is properly overseen and it's subject to rules and accountability and inspection that produces a cannabis that adult Canadians can use and know what its potency and purity is. We are also putting in new regulations for its distribution. Currently, cannabis is sold in every neighborhood in Canada. It's in every schoolyard. It's far too available to our children, and the cannabis that they're selling, that our drug traffickers are selling, is unsafe, unregulated, and untested. And we're going to replace that system so that the only cannabis that will be available for legal sale will be that which has been produced under strict license and the conditions set by Health Canada, and only that which is sold through the provincial regulated distribution systems. In Ontario, that'll be an online system, and next April they'll have in place retail stores. But in different provinces and territories, they have different models for the distribution, but it all is predicated on two important principles. We have to do a better job of protecting our children. We have to keep this drug out of the hands of our kids because this is a drug which is dangerous for our children. And we want to take this business away from criminals. They profit in the billions of dollars every single year, and they do no good with this money. And so we want to create a well-regulated industry that employs Canadians, creates real jobs, wealth and growth in our communities, where people pay their taxes and contribute to their communities, but also create a safer environment for Canadians adult Canadians who choose to use this drug, so that they're not subject to dangerous chemicals and adulterating other drugs that can be dangerous for them. You know, we're trying to bring a situation that is chaotic under control.
Definitely. We'll discuss about the policing part, how police is going to keep a check on it because they are being trained for this. Apart from that, what will be the measure to keep a regulated check on this regulation to monitor this, that everything is being done under the law?
Well, it is the responsibility, first of all, of the police to enforce the new regulations. We have been training the police on those regulations, and you know they have a learning curve. It'll take some time for them to get it up to speed. But let me just, for example, currently, if give you an example, for a 15 or 16-year-old youth who is found in possession of cannabis today, the police will charge them criminally. They get a criminal record. But it does not result in any significant consequence other than that criminal record, which can be devastating to that child. After the new regulations come in place, there will still be a complete prohibition. No young person under the age of 19 in Ontario will be able to purchase or consume cannabis. It will be against the law. But instead of getting a criminal charge, they will get a ticket. The police will be able to seize the drug. They'll be able to give the ticket. It's actually a much more efficient and proportional consequence for that behavior. But we are also retaining certain criminal laws. For anyone who sells cannabis to a child, it is a criminal offense with a maximum penalty of up to 14 years. Illegal production, illegal trafficking, illegal import and export remain serious criminal offenses. And the police have had those authorities for decades. They know how to do that. The new job that we're asking them to do is enforce some of these regulations through ticketing. But of course, the police are quite familiar with writing tickets, as you know.
Yeah.
You know, they write, even the laws that we are putting in place are actually quite similar to the laws that currently exist for alcohol. So if a young person is found in possession of alcohol or possession in cannabis, the police will have the ability to seize either of those intoxicants and issue a ticket to the child, take them home to their parent. There are real consequences. We can protect the child, but at the same time, we don't give that child a criminal record.
But police is being trained for all this from couple of years, but the requirement of the police officers to keep a check on this is 2,000. But at present we have the number only of 825.
Oh, you're talking of the officers who are trained
Yes.
for drug recognition experts.
Yes.
The law in Canada has allowed the use of drug recognition experts since 2008. So for almost 10 years, we have had the law that allowed police to train their officers and to use them as drug recognition experts. And in the first 8 years, they only trained 500 officers because the government never provided them with the resources and any funding and support to train their officers. We have changed that. We have made available up to $161 million to increase the training for police officers as drug recognition experts and for officers in standardized field sobriety testing. And we've seen a 60% increase just in the last 18 months of the number of officers who are now trained as drug recognition experts. You know, impaired driving by drugs has been a problem in this country for over a century, but the police never had the authorities, the technology, and the training that they needed to keep our roadways safe. And we haven't listened to them. And we have made those new authorities available as a result of new legislation. We now have the strongest impaired legislation of any country in the world. We've also made money available to train the police officers and to provide them access to the new technologies that have been used in other jurisdictions. Throughout Europe and in Australia and New Zealand, these technologies have been available, but never available in Canada until now. And so we have now approved the devices that the police said they needed, supplied the funding for the training that they said they required, given them the authorities they need to do the job. And I will tell you, I'm a former police officer myself and a former police chief. If you give the police the tools that they need to do the job, I have every confidence that they'll keep us safe.
Sure, we'll continue this conversation, but after a short break. Welcome back after the break. Minister, as we are discussing about, is Canada ready for this? Now you're traveling pan-Canada to discuss about the legalization or repealing of the law. Do you think the rest of the country is ready for that?
Well, there's been a lot of progress made. The provinces and territories have been working very hard, and they've put their own systems of regulation in place, which I think will be very helpful and will improve the situation. We are learning from each other. It's important to recognize that the implementation of very comprehensive new regulations is a process. It will take time for it to be fully operational, and for everyone to understand and learn their responsibilities. You know, there's another very important thing that's also taking place. We've invested significantly in public education. Public education aimed at two different audiences. The first is aimed at Canadians who would use this drug and drive. Being impaired by marijuana is a very dangerous thing. And so we want to make sure that Canadians understand, first of all, that it is a great risk and that drug does impair your ability to operate a motor vehicle. We also want them to know now that the police have the tools and technology to catch them. And so I want them to be deterred. I want to prevent impaired driving. And for those who are not deterred, there will be real consequences. They can have their licenses suspended and their car towed. They could face criminal charge as a result. And so we're educating Canadians about that. The other audience that we're also spending a lot of effort and resource into ensuring that better information is available is to young people. You know, we are putting in strict regulation to make it much more difficult for a young person to acquire cannabis. But we also want to make sure that they understand the risks, that they, as well as their parents, their teachers, their doctors, know the health risks and the social risks that cannabis can present to a young person, because this is a drug that can interfere with the development of the adolescent brain. Yes. It's a drug that can also lead to very serious social consequences. You know, failure in school. You know, who they're hanging around with. If they're buying it illegally, they're usually buying it from a criminal. And we don't want our children hanging around with criminals. And so we are changing the regulations to create a stricter environment, but we also are, through public education, we're trying to make sure that young people, as well as their parents and their teachers and their doctor, have the information they need to help young people make better choices and to be safer and healthier.
You mentioned impaired driving, but there was a study recently by CEA which mentions that around 1.9 million drivers, they have driven in their life under the influence of cannabis.
Yes, ma'am.
So when it's going to be legalized, then how are you going to deal with these kind of situations?
Ma'am, that study tells us that this is a problem that we have today. This is a problem that we have had for decades. We are not creating this problem, we're solving it. And so this has been a serious problem in our highways and roadways for decades in Canada. and the police have not had the ability to deter it, and the public has not been properly informed. And so we are solving both problems. We're making sure the police has the tools that they need, and that the public has the information that they need. And so we are taking I think, the right steps now to ensure that all Canadians understand that this drug can impair your ability to operate a motor vehicle, and that the police have the tools they need to keep our roadways safe and to uphold our laws. And so, driving under the impairment of drugs has been a penalty, an offense in Canada since 1925.
Yes.
But it's only today that the police have the technology and the tools that they need to detect and deter this crime, and it's only today that we're providing this information to Canadians that they need to make better and safer choices.
You have been working very hard for this, the whole legalization process. You must have lost a lot of challenges too. If you talk about First Nations, they have said they are gonna ban this cannabis. So how government is thinking of dealing with this situation with the First Nations?
We've been working very, very closely with First Nations and Indigenous people across Canada. Many of the First Nations communities understand the great potential of economic development opportunity for them. And so we've been working very closely with those First Nations to assist them in participating in the new developing industry so that they can get licenses, for example, to act as licensed producers of cannabis. This is a job-creating opportunity for their communities. We're also working with them to assist them in exercising their authority over issues of retail. And there's an ongoing discussion about the sharing of the revenue, because there are both economic and revenue opportunities within cannabis for Canadians and for Canadian communities and for First Nations communities. And so those discussions have been ongoing. We are also recognize that among our Indigenous communities, some of those Indigenous communities, their youth have higher rates than the national average for other youth in the country. And so there needs to be very specific and significant investment in those communities so that we are delivering public education in their language, in a culturally appropriate way. That's also very important to reach their children. And then finally, for those communities who are concerned about how it will be impacting on their communities, we'll work very closely to them, but I would remind them a century of prohibition has led to a circumstance where our children are among the highest users anywhere, and criminals are profiting in the billions of dollars. And in my experience, that strict regulation of production, distribution, and consumption is a safer and more effective way to control this drug, to take the business away from criminals and to protect our children.
Any other challenge you have faced? You think you're gonna deal with this before the legalization comes in?
I need everyone to, one of the challenges for us is because there is significant revenue opportunities, the licensed producers and those that are going into the business, there's a lot of money involved. Because there is a taxation opportunity, people start thinking about the money. I want people not to be overly concerned about the money. I want people to think about our kids and to think about our safety. And I want the focus of Canadians to be on how do we keep this drug out of the hands of our children, because there is no greater responsibility for any of us than the protection of our kids. It is the most important thing to every Canadian. And so we need to do the right job, the full job of protecting our children from the risks of this drug. And we need to make our communities safer by taking this billions of dollars in profit away from criminals and reinvest it into the public good. And there will be revenue and there will be opportunity. And I am pleased that in many towns and communities right across Canada, jobs are being created and opportunities are being created. And that's a good thing. That's one of our responsibilities, to help the middle class grow. But at the same time, let us never forget the importance of our kids and our safety.
For sure. We'll continue this conversation, but after a short break. Welcome back after the break. Minister, there is another concern among the Canadians, especially those who are working in the industry when they're going across the border. What's going to happen with them when they're going to USA? Because there have been few news that they will be taken as drug traffickers.
Well, it's very interesting. In our conversations with the American authorities, and I think it's important for Canadians to understand that Canadian border officers and U.S. border officers, we work very closely together, because that shared border is an important thing for both of our countries, for our economic opportunity and for the quality of our lives and the relationship that we share. The Americans, like Canada, have the authority to restrict people coming into the country. If someone arrives at the border, first of all, I want all Canadians to understand Notwithstanding it will become legalized and regulated in Canada, it will still be a serious criminal offense to take cannabis across the border.
Yes.
Into the United States or from the United States into Canada. And so no Canadian should attempt to take any amount of marijuana into the United States. That would be a serious crime and could result in serious penalties. The Americans will be cautious. If someone arrives at the border who is smelling of marijuana or who appears to be in possession of marijuana, they're going to be checked. And if they're found to be in possession of marijuana, they're not going to be allowed into the United States. If at the same time they announce to the Americans they're in the cannabis business in Canada and they want to go to the United States to also engage in the cannabis business where it's not lawful, they're not going to be allowed into the country. But the Americans have indicated to us it is business as usual. And in the last several years, we have had a licensed medical marijuana production industry that employs thousands of Canadians. We've not had the experience of them being excluded from going across the border. And those licensed producers are private companies. Canadians have invested hundreds of millions of dollars, even billions of dollars, into those companies. And we have not seen people experiencing significant impediments or problems at the border. If you go to the border and say, I'm in the marijuana business and I'm going to the United States to engage in the marijuana business, the Americans quite rightfully will say, but that's not lawful here and we're not going to let you in. But I think if Canadians are responsible and respectful, when they go to the border and are seeking entry into the United States, my expectation is that they will be treated fairly.
Okay. Apart from cannabis, there is another concern in the various provinces, especially in the community, is increase in gun violence.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you think the government is dealing with this to reduce the increased crime?
Actually, there's a couple of things. Let me just speak briefly about cannabis again.
Please go ahead.
One of the things I know as the police chief in Toronto is that much of the gang violence that took place in my city was a result of disputes between gang members over the turf in which they were selling marijuana. So if we can take the business away from those gangs, we may be able to reduce the violence that takes place because they won't have as much reason to engage in that violence and to shoot each other. Our government recognizes the serious concern that Canadians have about gun violence increasing in their communities right across Canada. We've seen increases in Toronto, in Montreal, in Vancouver, but we've seen increases in other parts of the country as well. And so, well, first of all, we've made significant investments in the police. We've put a lot of additional new money, $347 million, into guns and gangs initiatives to help the police gather better intelligence, to engage in enforcement activities, to work in an integrated environment so they work better together to fight the problem with gangs and guns in all of our communities. We've held a national gun violence summit where we brought experts and police officials from across the country together to share their experience and to learn from each other. We're also making significant investments in the communities where this violence is taking place, because we know that many of the young people that get involved in this violence, if they're given better choices, if there's better opportunities in school and in employment and better housing and better access to mental health services, maybe those kids will make better choices. And finally, I have been tasked by the Prime Minister to conduct an examination of the possibility of banning handguns and further restrictions for assault rifles, to do it in a way which is respectful of lawful gun owners, but to look for ways in which we can be more effective in keeping those guns out of the hands of people that would commit a crime. It's a huge priority for our government. We also know that many of those guns also come across the border, and so we've put a lot of money into the Customs Border Security agencies whose job it is to keep those firearms and other contraband material from coming across the border. We work in collaboration with the United States, with the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms Unit in the United States, which is responsible for firearms trafficking there, and we work in integrated border enforcement teams at the border to keep those guns and other contraband material out of Canada. You know, it's a very big job. We will do everything we can to reduce the supply of those guns getting into the hands of criminals, but we have to work with our young people and we have to work in communities to reduce the demand for those guns, the reasons why violence takes place in our community. And so our government is looking at this as a whole of government response to do all of the things, not just the one thing, but the hundreds and thousands of things that must be done in every community to make a difference.
Sure, but government is doing there, but anything you would like to give message to the public or appeal to the public, how they can do their part?
Yes, of course. You know, public safety is a shared responsibility. It is not just the responsibility of the government or just the responsibility of the police. It is all of our responsibility. But I would also remind all Canadians, the greatest enemy of public safety is fear. When people become afraid, when they become afraid of their neighbors, if they become afraid of their community, you know, if they become afraid and they start putting locks on the doors and bars on the windows, They stop going to public space. They stop interacting with their neighbors. They stop working with the authorities. Fear leads to greater violence. Fear leads to crime. And in my experience, if you want to keep your city safe, your community and your neighborhood safe, you have to make sure that people are not fearful. And that means we all must work together. We all must, go out and take our kids to the park, interact with our neighbors, go to the local main street and engage with the local shopkeepers. These are our public spaces. These are our neighborhoods. This is our community, and we have to fight to keep it safe. And the best way to do that is not to be made fearful by violence and by criminals, but to own our public space and to use it properly.
Sure. Minister, you mentioned about fear. One fear I have in my mind, how to deal with the situation of the cannabis, how to, with my kids. How should I make them aware of the whole legalization process?
Yes, ma'am. For the longest time, the only thing I'm a parent too, and I have grandchildren. And I've talked to parents across the country. And parents are legitimately concerned about the health of their children. They're concerned about who their children are associating with and their social development. And they're also worried that their kids currently could get arrested and charged criminally. So they're worried about all of those things. We've tried to change that situation. But I'm hopeful now that parents can have a different conversation with their kids. Instead of just saying, don't do it because it's against the law. It's still prohibited for those kids, but now I hope we can have a conversation that talks about the health risks so that we can explain to our children how dangerous this is. And I think we can learn from the example that we've had with tobacco. 25 years ago, tobacco use was very, very common in Canada. Almost 25% of Canadians were smoking cigarettes. If you went into any classroom today and you ask our children about smoking cigarettes, all of them will tell you it's bad. All of them will tell you it's bad for you, it can kill you, and don't do it. We've had a lot of success in teaching our kids about the risks of cannabis. We didn't threaten to put them in jail for smoking a cigarette. We educated them. We had better conversations with our kids about the real risks. And it's changed behavior. Today, only 11% of Canadians still smoke, and we're aiming to get that down to 5%. And then there is no public space where people will smoke cigarettes. 25 years ago, everyone would smoke in a restaurant, in a bar, in an office, in the school, out on the street, everywhere. And today we have put very significant restrictions. We regulated that activity. In the same way, we're supposed to regulate the use of cannabis. And we're hoping, and we've made significant investments in education materials. And there is a very fine document, and it's about how parents can have a conversation with their children about cannabis. We have had that translated into many languages, including Punjabi. And so if people in the Punjabi want to acquire that, it can be made available through Health Canada. And about how to have conversations with your kids. I also I had a good conversation yesterday. I went to the York Region District School Board, and they have been working tirelessly to develop a really good curriculum so that teachers can have a better conversation about kids, with their kids, about how to be safe, how to be healthy, how to make better choices. And it's better than threatening our kids has not worked. Educating our kids will.
Educating is. So most important is education and awareness. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this information and taking out your time for PTC Punjabi. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to the Punjabi community. It's a very important part of Canada.
Yes, thank you so much, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you.